Welcome back to the Eve approach, and today's episode is more of a Gilly approach, I suppose. So, we've had a look around Eve, we've started doing our preliminary work around there, but we've also got Gilly, Eve's moon, and Gilly is very interesting. It's very small, it's very, very small, in fact, compared to Eve. So I thought, right, we're going to send a craft there. We're going to send some communication. We're going to send a lander. We're going to try and get some science from the surface there. We're not going to return it just yet, but we're going to get it. So here we have Gilly 1, and on the top we've basically got one of our communication probes from previous episodes, and I'm going to stick underneath this lander, and this lander is primarily made up of that Science Junior sort of unit and a little probe core. Now obviously NASA and people like that do send up craft that are sort of, parts like this, where you've got a lander and an orbiter and things like that. It's quite common. The one I always think about is actually Beagle, which is quite sad because Beagle did land, it just didn't work, shall we say. Recently we found out that it landed, it just didn't unfurl its solar panels, so that's a negative. Anyway, Gilly, very, very small, which means it's got very low gravity, so we don't need much fuel once we're actually there. And in reality, I actually overbuilt this. Now, important point, I want communications on our lander, so instead of putting things on the side, I go and try and put one of these on in the middle, and I sort of attach it to the surface and then move it to the middle and just check that it fits. And then what we can actually do is we can probably strut around it and make it pretty and whatnot. Just pull that out. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, use the offset. There we go. Get it right. Now start again. Try again. So we're actually going to use a instead of a decoupler, we're going to use a separator. That means that both the top and bottom nodes will detach, because I was concerned about that. And then we're going to put some struts in there. We're going to figure that out. There we go. And then some struts on the top as well, just like that. Now, technically, I don't think I need them, but it just looked better. And in reality, I wish I hadn't have done that, but you'll see why in a minute. So, craft is ready to go. And we should really sort of always check around, make sure your craft's okay, make sure you got everything set up, make sure you got action groups. I don't think action groups was a problem on this one, but often it's very easy to build your craft and forget the action groups. So, next step I thought was, well, I'm a little concerned about fuel around Gilly. I don't know if our launch stage will have enough, so I put a little tiny extra stage on. In reality, you actually probably don't need this. Once you're in Gilly's sphere of influence and you've actually captured, it's very little delta V to actually land on it, so that's not a big issue. So we take that, and we're done. We're basically gonna build our stock launcher underneath it, and wham bam, we're sorted. So the stock launcher, of course, you've seen many times before. This was actually me building it, so I thought I'd include this because I think this was the first craft that I properly finished designing for the series, ironically. So you get to see the actual building process there, and I was thinking of which engines to use, and I thought, can I use different ones, can I use different tank sizes, things like that. And yeah, we come up with this sort of final-ish design, and it's a variation on what we've got for the others and things like that. And then of course remember to strut it up because you don't want it to go a bit wobbly. This is not a heavy craft. This is actually probably one of our smallest launches of the series so far. So we launch off, and it's a pretty simple launch. You see, we've actually got almost no wobble. There is zero wobble in this. We've got quite a bit of struttage there. We've also got, you notice I don't use the fairings because we're using a narrow launch stage. This isn't the fatter launch stage that we use for some of our other stuff. It's actually the first, I think, launch stage we built. Just got those engines on the second stage there. Again, looks like our other previous launch stages, but it's actually just a smaller version. It's actually the first one we built. It's quite tight at this point, and this is partly why I put that extra stage on the very top, because I was concerned I wouldn't have enough fuel. The other thing is we don't actually have the communications on the rest of the craft that we do on earlier versions that you've seen in the rest of the series. So this was before all that. So we actually do use that probe on the top. So we saved a bit of weight for that, and we use the solar panels. Now, you'll notice the solar panels have been unfurled. I don't believe you can pull them back in once they've been unfurled. Let me put it this way. We have a problem later that is partly because of the fact that I did not use the standard launcher that I've used for everything else. And because I did that, I had to unfurl these solar panels. Because if you remember, the other launcher has solar panels built into it, and this one doesn't. So I had to unfurl the solar panels on this craft there. Now I could have actually just used the new thermonuclear decomposition-y source of energy for the energy, and I didn't have to put the solar panels out, so it was actually a bit of a silly for me. Anyway, we do a little bit of a modification on the burn. Again, we are using the maneuver planner and the alarm clock that's actually stock now, because I'm trying to force myself to use it and get used to it. And so we do that, and we're heading off now towards the sphere of influence, and we do a little plane change check, just change the plane a little bit, because I want to come in pretty much so that I can go into the same plane as Gilly, and so you can do some plane changes on the way there and things like that, just to make it a little easier. And there you go, you can see I've actually done a change of plane slightly whilst I was in sort of Kerbal space before we actually get to Eve, and it may not have been the most efficient place to do it, but I just wanted to be sort of more confident in my approach at that point. So there we go, we get a bit of science as we come in, and we have the interesting opening of antenna that I always think, why was it do that when I've got a relay antenna on the top already open? But it seems obsessed to doing that, and we get a bit of science. We transmit stuff because we're still trying to get our science on, and we're going to do our capture burn around Eve. But unlike others, I don't want to capture tightly. In fact, I want to capture really loosely, because I'm going to want to change my inclination once we actually get captured, because I want to end up putting this craft on the same inclination in Gilly, and Gilly is not equatorial. It is actually a reasonably high inclination. So there we go. We just do our little burn, and that basically captures us. And you can see I've actually managed to bring it into line almost with Gilly's orbit, and then we're going to do a little plane change quite far out when we're going nice and slow, because the slower we're going when we do our plane change, the better it is. And that's a nice shot there, obscuring Eve with our engines, which I'm not sure that's the most artistic of shots that I've ever done, but we'll go there. And we're just basically now just checking, and you can see I'm looking, have I got an encounter? There we go. In a few orbits I have an encounter, and I can do a little playing around with it. And you can be really lucky with Gilly and just get a very quick encounter. Sometimes you have to play a little bit, because it does have a very small sphere of influence. So we're going to go past Eve a few times there. Whoop, 2. Did we do 3? I think we definitely do 3. Did we do 4? I think 4, yes, definitely. All right, so on the 4th pass of Eve, we have 4 orbits of Eve, and they take a while. This is where we're going to do our little burn, and it's only a couple of meters per second. I could, if I'd have had RCS or something like that, I'd have actually used that because it's so small. And you can see there, we're just checking, do we have an interaction with Gilly? Yeah, we do. We can see it's a little skitty. It's not entirely sure if it wants to do it. Once you're in the vicinity, though, you can, particularly with Gilly, you can actually force your encounter just by sometimes burning towards Gilly, in fact, because its sphere of influence is quite small, and its gravity is so small in the air. So here we go, we're going to come in. You can see it doesn't look like a very good encounter. We look quite sort of, far away, but actually Gilly, you can see there is tiny, and its sphere of influence is tiny. So we're going to take quite a bit of delta V to capture in this, but once you've captured, you're there for ease. It's very easy to do any other sort of maneuvers around Gilly. So we burn off 450 meters per second, something like that, and because the engine is too powerful, we actually overshoot just by a tiny. I actually hit the throttle for like half a second too much, and we overshoot, and we're actually going to hit Gilly. So now we turn the other way and fire the engines again on the lowest possible thrust, and even then it's sort of quite speedy. At this point I decide we'll get rid of that engine. Now in reality, I could have actually not had this stage here, this little orange tank. It isn't needed. We could have landed the whole craft down with just a lander, because if you look, our orbital speed is about it's less than 20 meters per second. Yeah, it's not particularly high. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to dump off the communication system. Now, I could have done that before we got rid of that orange tank even. So we again do the big transfer stage. If we kept the big transfer stage, we could have done all of this without this little orange tank. But particularly around Gilly, having a small engine is probably a bonus, because you don't overfire your engines, and that can be problematic. So you see here we've got less, single digit meters per second for actually doing an inclination change. And it is quite a significant inclination change. I think it's something like 25 degrees or something like that. I'd have to go back and look closely at the video and check. I'm sure somebody can comment down below on that. And so there we go. We did the inclination change, and then we're like, right, okay, do we want to put it into a circular orbit? Well, we could do that. Now, in reality, the communications probe has its own fuel on board, so it could actually do all of this itself. It seems a bit silly to be doing it with this engine, but again, we've got the fuel, we might as well. So we're going to do a little tiny burn there, and it is literally a tiny burn. You see, you can barely see anything happening. In fact, it's so tiny. And then it's time to decouple. Yeah, this is the fun bit. We decouple and everything explodes. Absolutely everything. There we go. Solar panels are gone. Yeah, so this communications probe basically has limited power right now. It is going to be pretty useless. Its original plan was that it was going to give us signal around the back of Gilly when it was blocking line of sight to Eve, where it's got a communication system, because Gilly is close enough that our higher communication system around Eve would actually be working for that. But yeah, that looks like that's a problem. So we may have to fix that. You can also see that the actual decoupling has put the craft onto a new orbit, a significant new orbit. In fact, the communication system is actually about to escape Gilly because of the explosion. So we get that to circularize its orbit, and then we jump away. And we'll leave that where it is. We'll actually deal with that in a future episode. We'll send something just to fix it, because I don't like the idea of having just a craft that, it's sort of cheaty. It has batteries on board, so it's not going to be draining power much. But I feel as though it needs solar panels, because it just should have something working. So there we go. We get rid of our little transport tank there, and you can see we've got 15, 16, 17 meters per second now. Obviously we're heading straight down now, and it's concerning. Unfortunately, Gilly's gravity is it's weak. It's very weak. I mean, in the build section, if you go back to the start where I was building it, I actually switched the delta V reading over to Gilly, because you can do that. You can click on the bottom and change the body that you're actually relative to, and it will show you your relative thrust against the planetary body or whatever. And I think this engine was giving us like 15 times G, or 15 times relative gravity at the surface of Gilly, or something like that. It was stupid. If you sneeze on Gilly, you could end up in orbit, or you could, The good thing is, if you actually sneeze on Gilly and fly up, 100 meters into the air, you come back down, you're not going to hurt yourself, because you're still going to be traveling reasonably slowly. The acceleration is so slow. So you can see we're coming down, and oh my, look at that. The speed's really increasing. Better fire the engine a little bit. Ooh, there we go. Just pull that down just a smidgen. Just a tiny weeny bit there. Just pull it all the way down. And I actually could have gone a lot faster down. I decided not to. I decided to actually just slow down a bit. And this took a little while, because it is quite a while since this is my first landing on Gilly in probably 5 years. Gilly is not a place I go to often. I don't feel a need to, for some reason. I remember you used to be, and I don't know if you still can, you used to be able to, and there we go, we're down. Our reaction will actually hold us on the edge there. We stop that, we open all our experiments, gather science, wonderful, we can transmit that. Now, other problem with Gilly is that any time that you have any sort of ground clipping or anything is likely to cause visibly interesting results. So you can see there, we don't actually have much in the way of batteries on this, and it uses all electricity transmitting all of this science. And we set the transmitter to partial, because we realized that that's going to be a better way of doing it. And then it's literally just, you can see there that the RTGs are producing electricity, but just not very quickly. Probably, oh, there we go. I did a bit of a time warp to speed up the transmission of science and the getting of electric, and when we come out of time warp, we get that little clipping situation, and the whole craft flies into the air. But that's okay, because it's Gilly, so they were fine. Look at that. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that brilliant? So you get your usual clipping that would cause it to tip sideways, or your craft explodes. With Gilly, no, it's just like a soft pillow. It's like landing in a soft pillow, Gilly. And I've sped this up significantly. This took an awfully long time to do. It was possibly one of the most tedious tasks ever, because it was a case of just sit and watch as your experiments transmit. Note to self, bigger batteries, solar panels. If I was doing this again, I would stick solar panels. I don't really like putting solar panels on landers, particularly ones that, and where we go. Another note to Gilly, if you stop time warping, it will throw you up, and you can see the engine actually sticks out. I don't like that view there. I should have recessed the engine a bit inside the toroidal tank there, because that just looks horrible actually on that image. And you can see here we got quite a bit of distance. So what are we, about 75 meters up? So imagine, well, 70, I think it's going to be 80, is it? We're going to hit 80 surely. We're close to 80. If you got to 80 meters up on Earth and then started falling back down, yeah, you wouldn't have legs after. Well, you might have legs, but they wouldn't be functional afterwards, I don't think. But Gilly, no, not so. Now, the problem we have here is I'm transmitting science, which means I don't have electricity, and because I don't have any electricity, I can't use the reaction control or the reaction wheels or anything. So this craft is basically just doing whatever it wants right now. The amusing thing is that we're still transmitting science, which I think is hilarious, because that little antenna on the top, I'm going to allow this to happen because Gilly is so weak on gravity, but if it had been somewhere else, I would have to sort of say to myself, the antenna should be broken, because that antenna should have actually just folded up. If that had happened, there you go. So now we get a bit of power back, and we can just right ourselves, and you go there. The gravity is so weak that actually I overcorrect, and then we just hold it on like two of its legs for a mile while we do stuff, and then we come back to transmitting the science. So yeah, the next time, if we send something to Gilly, and we probably will, we're going to do a few things, I think, in Gilly. We're going to send some things, and probably bigger batteries, I think, will be key for what we do. Although I seem to have a big issue with just electricity in general. I always seem to not have enough. I think because in earlier versions of KSP, batteries just really didn't have a use, and energy sources didn't have a use. Your solar panels were very much sort of very nice to look at, but yeah, what are you going to do with them, sort of thing. And so I think I need to get out of that mentality. I know RP1 has actually got me being very sort of critical of battery usage, and often my things are very on the brink, but stock, I still need to work on it, and particularly with transmitting large distances interplanetary, it takes a bit of power, and if you've got a lot of science, it takes a bit of power. So yeah, this craft is pretty much it. So Gilly has been landed on. We've got our communications around it, which is about to run out of battery. We do have some science from this, which is nice, and I think this probably finishes most of our science needs. Actually, we've got a lot of science there. So there we are on the surface of Gilly. Nice little view with Eve in the background there, and you can see we're on the equator. And so there we are. That is the end of the episode. And it's also the end of the first wave. This is the first 4 episodes were all launched at the same time. They all arrived at the same time. So they all had the same tech level. They all basically were intermingled. So next episode, we're actually going to be launching our second wave, which is where we've got a bit more science involved. We can get a bit more creative with our launches, and we're actually going to start looking at building up some infrastructure around around Eve and Gilly, because yeah, it's not going to be easy to land on Eve, and I want to do it properly. So, from me, until next time, have a great one.